right. So today we're going to take a deep dive into something
Okay.
pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
We're talking about Gen Z.
Okay.
Anyone born after 1995
Mm-hmm.
and the anxieties they're facing.
Right.
And, you might be part of Gen Z yourself.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're a parent or a teacher or just someone who's curious about this generation.
Right.
But we're going to unpack Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation.
Okay.
Which really explores the mental health challenges
Yeah.
that Gen Z is up against.
It's a fascinating topic because, it's not just about like a few stressed out kids here and there.
Right.
The numbers actually show a significant rise in serious mental health issues.
Yeah, and it's like a sudden wave, right?
Yeah.
Like Haidt points out this huge jump in mental health problems among teenagers starting around 2012.
Yeah.
And we're talking about major depression, anxiety disorders.
Right.
A whole range of issues.
Mm-hmm.
And the book uses actual figures to illustrate this.
Yeah.
For instance, like the figure 1.1 shows how the percentage of U.S. teens reporting a major depressive episode in the past year just shot up after 2012.
Wow.
It's pretty alarming.
And what's even more striking is that it's not just like happening in one place or in one particular group of people.
Yeah.
Haidt's book also shows that these trends are happening across different races and social classes, and even in other English-speaking countries like Canada and the UK.
So it's like a global phenomenon.
Yeah. Figure 1.8 highlights this as well, showing a similar trend of mental health decline in those countries.
So if it's happening everywhere,
right,
then what's going on? It's got to be more than just...
It's more than just typical teenage angst, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
And Haidt actually debunks some of the usual suspects.
Right.
He points out that things like economic downturns or anxieties about climate change haven't historically led to this scale of mental health decline.
Okay, so what's different about Gen Z?
Yeah, so this is where Haidt gets into this idea of the Great Rewiring.
Okay.
And it's basically his theory about how smartphones and social media have changed how kids experience the world.
Okay.
Especially those born after 1995.
So Gen Z is the first generation to grow up fully immersed in this digital world.
Yeah, they've never known life without instant connectivity, constant notifications, and the pressure to present this perfect online persona.
Yeah, it's like their childhoods have been fundamentally different from any generation before.
Completely different.
Haidt makes this comparison to raising kids on Mars.
Oh, wow.
Suggesting there's a mismatch between how humans are meant to develop and the environment Gen Z is growing up in.
It's a really interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
One of the key aspects of this mismatch, according to Haidt, is the decline of free play.
Okay.
And he argues that free play, just kids running around making up games, is crucial for how kids develop social skills and emotional intelligence.
And instead of playgrounds and hide and seek, it's all about screens now.
Yeah.
Haidt calls smartphones experience blockers.
Yeah.
Pulling kids away from real-world interactions and into these isolated online spaces.
Yeah. And so what's the impact of all that?
Right. What's the impact?
Well, Haidt uses this really interesting concept called anti-fragility.
Oh, okay.
And this basically means that things, including humans, get stronger when they're exposed to challenges. It's kind of like how our immune system develops by fighting off infections, or how muscles grow stronger through weightlifting.
Yeah.
You need some stress to build resilience.
So you're saying that kids need to experience some bumps and bruises, both literally and figuratively.
Both literally and figuratively.
To develop into healthy adults.
Exactly.
Okay.
He argues that the overprotected environments many Gen Z kids grow up in, combined with the constant validation they seek online, actually makes them more fragile.
Interesting.
They haven't had the chance to develop coping skills for the real world.
Makes sense.
Because their digital lives are so curated and controlled.
It's like they're living in a bubble.
Exactly. It's a really good way to put it.
And Haidt actually uses the example of old school playgrounds
to
illustrate this point.
Like the ones
with the super high middle slides and those spinny things that would make you dizzy.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
He shows a picture of a playground spinner in figure 3.5.
Okay.
They were a bit risky, sure, but those risks were manageable, allowing kids to test their limits.
Yeah. And he also mentions Coney Island in figure 3.7.
Oh, okay.
A place with all sorts of exciting and potentially risky activities.
Yeah.
His point is that kids naturally seek out
Yeah.
these kinds of challenges. It's how they learn and grow.
So if everything is sanitized and risk-free,
Yeah.
they miss out on those opportunities.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the online world,
Right.
where things get even more complicated.
Yeah, because online interactions are often shallow and they lack the nuance of real-world communication.
Right.
And because everything online can be amplified and preserved forever,
It's true.
the stakes feel much higher.
Yeah.
Even a small social misstep online can have long-lasting consequences.
It's like the difference between learning to ride a bike in your neighborhood and trying to learn on a video game.
Exactly.
The stakes are just way higher in real life.
And Haidt points out that this online environment is particularly challenging for girls.
Okay.
The constant social comparison and pressure to meet these unrealistic beauty standards, often amplified on platforms like Instagram, can be incredibly damaging to their self-esteem.
And it's not just about looks, right? Cyberbullying has also become a much bigger problem, especially for girls.
Yeah, the anonymity of the internet makes it easier for bullies to be cruel.
Right.
And the fact that everything is online means that the hurt can last a lot longer.
That's a good point.
Haidt even talks about this phenomenon called mass social media-induced illness.
Wow.
He points to cases where teenagers, particularly girls, are developing physical and psychological symptoms based on what they're seeing online.
So it's almost like a social contagion.
It is. It's like a social contagion.
Where anxiety and insecurity spread through these online networks.
Exactly.
So girls are bearing a lot of the brunt of this.
Yeah.
But what about the boys? Are they immune to the impacts of this great rewiring?
Not at all.
Okay, so
while girls might be struggling more visibly with things like social comparison and cyberbullying, boys are facing their own set of challenges.
All right, so what's the story with boys then?
Yeah, so Haidt argues that in a world where traditional ideas about masculinity are being questioned, boys are turning to virtual spaces, like video games and smartphones, to find a sense of control and belonging. These online worlds offer a kind of escape from the complexities of real life.
It's like they're finding a sense of power and agency.
Yeah.
That's harder to come by in the real world.
Exactly.
But could that kind of disengagement have downsides as well?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Haidt suggests that this constant immersion in virtual worlds can have negative consequences for boys, too. He points to the easy access to pornography, for example, and how it can warp young people's understanding of healthy relationships and sexuality.
It's not about saying that all technology is bad.
No, not at all.
It's more about recognizing that these digital experiences can become substitutes for real-world learning and growth.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance. And this ties into a broader societal concern that Haidt calls spiritual degradation. And he's not necessarily talking about religion here, but more about a sense of meaning and purpose in life. A feeling of connection to something bigger than yourself.
So how does the digital world tie into that spiritual degradation?
Well, he argues that a life dominated by smartphones tends to be very self-focused. You're constantly checking your notifications, curating your online persona, scrolling through endless feeds. And he says this can lead to a kind of spiritual emptiness because we're missing out on those collective experiences that build community and give life meaning.
That makes me think of figure 8.2 in the book.
Oh, yeah.
Haidt compares the self-focused nature of social media with the feeling of awe you might experience in nature. It's like that feeling of being part of something much larger than yourself. Something that makes your own problems seem small.
It's a really powerful point. We need those experiences of awe and wonder.
I agree.
To counterbalance the constant inward focus of the digital world. But Haidt doesn't just leave us there with a bunch of problems and no solutions.
Good.
He actually spends a good chunk of the book exploring potential ways to address these issues.
So what can we do about all this?
Is
there any hope for Gen Z?
I think there's a lot of hope for Gen Z. Haidt is optimistic.
Okay.
He sees it as a collective action problem where we need to work together to change things.
Got it.
It's like when everyone overfishes a lake because they're only thinking about their own catch.
Right.
And then the lake runs out of fish for everyone.
So if we keep acting selfishly in the digital world, we'll all end up worse off.
Exactly.
But if we work together, we can make things better.
That's the idea.
Okay.
He suggests a multi-pronged approach that involves governments, tech companies, school.
And of course, parents.
All right, so let's start with governments.
Okay.
What role can they play in all this?
Well, Haidt argues that governments need to step up and regulate the tech industry, especially social media companies, to protect children from addictive designs and harmful content.
It's like how we regulate other things that could harm kids.
Exactly.
Like food safety or the sale of alcohol.
Yeah.
We wouldn't let a company sell something dangerous to a child. So why should social media be any different?
Exactly. He specifically talks about establishing a duty of care for tech companies. Meaning they would be legally responsible for protecting children on their platforms.
He actually uses the UK as a good example.
Oh, yeah.
They have this age-appropriate design code that sets standards for online spaces to make them safer for kids.
It's like building a fence around a playground to keep the kids safe.
It's a good analogy.
And part of this duty of care
would involve age verification, making sure kids aren't accessing content that's not appropriate for their age.
So we're not just relying on parental controls alone.
Exactly.
But putting the responsibility on tech companies to enforce age restrictions.
Yeah, it's like how stores have to check IDs to sell alcohol. We don't just expect parents to stop their kids from buying beer, right?
Exactly.
Haidt suggests that one way to do this could be through device-based verification, where parents could essentially flag their child's devices, signaling to tech companies that this user is a minor. This wouldn't stop adults from using those platforms. But would provide an extra layer of protection for kids.
Okay, so that's what governments can do in the digital world.
Yeah.
But what about making the real world more appealing?
Yeah, so Haidt talks about the culture of safetyism that's become so prevalent. It's this idea that we need to protect kids from every possible danger, even if it means limiting their freedom and independence.
Interesting.
He argues that we need to loosen the reins a bit. And let kids experience the world, even if it means they might get a few bumps and bruises along the way.
It's like wrapping kids in bubble wrap.
Exactly.
You might be protecting them from scrapes.
Yeah.
But they're also missing out on the joys of running around and exploring.
Exactly. And one practical step he suggests is supporting legislation, like the reasonable childhood independence laws that are being discussed in some places.
Who are those?
These laws protect parents who allow their children age-appropriate independence from being unfairly accused of neglect.
So it's like saying, hey, it's okay to let your kid walk to the park by themselves.
Yeah.
It's actually good for them to have some freedom.
We need to reframe the way we think about risk and independence in childhood. It's not about being careless. It's about recognizing that kids need to experience some level of risk to develop into resilient and capable adults.
Okay, so governments have a role to play.
Yeah.
But what about the tech companies themselves? Can they do anything to be part of the solution?
Well, Haidt acknowledges that tech companies operate in a very competitive market where profits and engagement often outweigh ethical considerations.
It's that whole race to the bottom of the brainstem thing we talked about earlier, where companies are constantly trying to outdo each other to get our attention, even if it's not good for us in the long run.
Exactly. But Haidt suggests that tech companies can be part of the solution.
Okay, so how?
If we encourage them to prioritize user well-being alongside profits, he points to a few potential strategies. One of which is promoting phone-free environments.
Like in schools, for example.
Exactly, like in schools.
It makes sense that schools should be places where kids can focus on learning and interacting with each other. Without constant digital distractions.
He suggests that governments could even offer financial support to schools that implement phone-free policies.
Interesting.
Making it easier for them to purchase phone lockers or other systems for managing devices during school hours.
So it's like creating these digital sanctuaries.
It is.
Where kids can be present in the real world and engage with their learning in a more focused way.
And there's evidence to suggest that this approach can have a positive impact on both mental health and academic performance.
That makes sense.
Kids aren't constantly checking their phones.
Right.
They're not comparing themselves to others online. They're just present in the moment.
Right.
Learning and growing.
And Haidt doesn't just stop at banning phones.
No, he doesn't.
He wants to bring back more play in schools.
Yes.
Arguing that recess and unstructured playtime are crucial for kids' development.
It's not just a break from learning. It's how kids learn social skills, problem solving, and creativity.
He even points to studies showing that recess can actually improve kids' cognitive ability.
Yeah, and lead to better learning outcomes overall.
Wow.
So he suggests that schools need to provide kids with opportunities to engage in those kinds of activities that foster their development and well-being.
So it's not just about protecting them from the harms of the digital world. It's about actively nourishing them with real-world experiences.
Exactly. He highlights some inspiring examples of schools that are already doing this.
Like
for instance, he talks about Mountain Middle School in Colorado, which went phone-free back in 2012.
Wow.
And saw huge improvements in student well-being and engagement.
So it can be done.
It can be done. And it wasn't just about banning phones. They also incorporated more unstructured play into the school day.
That's a great example of how a simple change can make a big difference.
It really is.
But let's be honest, schools can't do it all.
Right.
Parents have a huge role to play, too.
Huge role to play.
So what's the tough love advice for parents in the digital age?
Well, Haidt approaches this with a lot of empathy. Understanding that parenting in the digital age is a totally new ballgame.
It feels like we're all figuring this out as we go along.
Right.
And the stakes are really high.
But he offers some really practical guidance, encouraging parents to focus on creating a supportive environment where kids can thrive. He uses a really helpful analogy.
What's that?
He says parents should think of themselves as gardeners, not carpenters.
So instead of trying to shape our kids into some predetermined outcome, we should focus on creating the right conditions for them to grow.
That's the idea.
I like that.
And one of the most important things parents can do, especially when kids are young, is to provide them with lots of unstructured playtime.
So it's about getting back to basics. Letting kids get dirty. Explore. Build forts. Use their imaginations. Without constant adult intervention.
It's about giving them the space to be kids.
And as kids get older, Haidt encourages parents to gradually give them more independence and responsibility, even if it makes us a bit anxious.
Exactly, because that's how they learn and grow. He also talks about the importance of modeling healthy tech habits ourselves. It's not enough to just tell kids to put down their phones if we're constantly glued to our own devices.
We have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. He suggests things like creating phone-free zones in the house, prioritizing family meals and face-to-face interactions, and being mindful of our own screen time.
So it's about leading by example.
Yes.
And showing our kids that there's more to life than just staring at a screen.
Exactly. It's about shifting the balance away from the digital world and back towards real-world experiences that foster growth, connection, and a sense of purpose.
So it's not about demonizing technology altogether. It's about using it consciously and intentionally. Making sure it serves us instead of the other way around.
That's a great way to put it. And Haidt's book offers a really hopeful and empowering perspective on how we can do just that.
So it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But I'm wondering, is there anything we're missing?
Well, Haidt's analysis is really comprehensive. And he offers some great solutions. But there's one thing he doesn't explicitly address.
What's that?
And that's the role of individual personality and temperament.
You mean how different people might react to technology in different ways?
Exactly. Not everyone who uses social media gets addicted or depressed. Not every kid who plays video games becomes isolated. There's a lot of individual variation in how we respond to these digital experiences.
So a one-size-fits-all approach to digital well-being might not be the best strategy.
Precisely. It would be helpful to figure out how to identify those who are more susceptible to the negative effects of social media and those who might need extra support in navigating the digital world.
So how do we assess someone's digital susceptibility?
Right.
I feel like that's a whole other deep dive we could explore.
Absolutely. There's a lot of potential for research in that area.
Okay.
But even without having all the answers,
Yeah.
we can still take steps now
Right.
to promote digital well-being for ourselves and our kids.
We don't have to wait for all the research to be done
Exactly.
before we start implementing some of these solutions.
Right.
And being more mindful of how we're interacting with technology.
And I think that's where Haidt's work is so valuable.
Okay.
He provides a framework for thinking about these issues in a more nuanced and holistic way.
So it's not about blindly embracing or rejecting technology.
Right, is that?
But about understanding its potential impact.
Yeah.
And making conscious choices about how we use it.
Exactly. And ultimately, it's about empowering ourselves and our kids to navigate the digital world in a way that supports our well-being, our relationships, and our sense of purpose.
Well said.
Thanks.
I think that's a perfect place to maybe take a break.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot.
We have covered a lot.
But when we come back,
yes,
we'll talk about
what can we do?
some more solutions.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back.
So where were we?
We were talking about, potential solutions.
Right.
Haidt had laid out this pretty bleak picture of, what's going on with Gen Z and technology and all this.
Right, all these challenges.
Yeah.
So, he talks about, the role of governments.
Right.
And tech companies and schools and parents.
Okay, so let's pick up with the governments.
Okay. Yeah.
What can they do?
So one of the things that Haidt suggests is that governments could offer financial support to schools that implement phone-free policies.
So, incentivize them.
Exactly. Incentivize them to make it easier for them to, purchase phone lockers or other systems for managing devices during school hours.
So it's like creating these digital sanctuaries.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Where kids can be present in the real world.
Yeah, and actually there's evidence to suggest that this approach can have a really positive impact on both mental health and academic performance.
That makes sense.
Kids aren't constantly checking their phones.
Right.
They're not comparing themselves to others online.
Right.
They're just present in the moment, learning and growing.
And Haidt doesn't just stop at banning phones.
No, he doesn't.
He wants to bring back more play in schools.
Yeah.
Arguing that recess and unstructured playtime are crucial for kids' development.
Exactly, because it's not just a break from learning. It's how kids learn, social skills and problem solving and creativity.
He even points to studies showing that recess can actually improve kids' cognitive abilities.
Yeah, and lead to better learning outcomes overall.
That's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So he suggests that, schools need to provide kids with opportunities to engage in those kinds of activities that foster their development and well-being.
So it's not just about protecting them from the harms of the digital world.
Right.
It's about actively nourishing them with real-world experiences.
Exactly. And he highlights some inspiring examples of schools that are already doing this.
Okay, like what?
For instance, he talks about Mountain Middle School in Colorado, which went phone-free back in 2012.
Interesting.
And saw huge improvements in student well-being and engagement.
So it can be done?
It can be done. And it wasn't just about banning phones. They also incorporated more unstructured play into the school day.
That's great. So that's a great example of how a simple change can make a big difference.
Yeah, it really is.
But let's be honest, schools can't do it all. Parents have a huge role to play, too.
A huge role to play.
So what's the tough love advice for parents?
Well, Haidt approaches this with a lot of empathy.
Okay.
Understanding that parenting in the digital age is a totally new ballgame.
It feels like we're all just figuring this out as we go along.
Yeah.
And the stakes are really high.
The stakes are really high. But he offers some really practical guidance.
Okay, good.
Encouraging parents to focus on creating a supportive environment
Oui.
where kids can thrive.
Got it.
And he uses a really helpful analogy.
What's that?
He says, parents should think of themselves as gardeners, not carpenters.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to shape our kids into some predetermined outcome,
right,
we should focus on creating the right conditions for them to grow.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Okay, I like that.
And one of the most important things parents can do, especially when kids are young, is to provide them with lots of unstructured playtime.
So it's about getting back to basics,
Yeah.
letting kids get dirty, explore, build forts,
Yeah.
use their imaginations
Right.
without constant adult intervention.
Yeah, it's about giving them that space to just be kids.
Okay. Yeah, and as kids get older,
Yeah.
Haidt encourages parents to gradually give them more independence and responsibility,
Right.
even if it makes us a little anxious.
It does make us anxious, but it's important because that's how they learn and grow.
Right.
He also talks about the importance of modeling healthy tech habits ourselves.
Right. It's not enough to tell our kids to put their phones down.
Exactly.
If we're constantly glued to our own devices.
Yeah, we have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
I like that.
So he suggests things like creating phone-free zones in the house.
Okay.
Prioritizing family meals and face-to-face interactions.
Okay.
And just being mindful of our own screen time.
So it's about leading by example.
Yeah.
And showing our kids that there's more to life than just staring at a screen.
Exactly. It's about shifting the balance away from the digital world and back towards real-world experiences.
Got it.
That foster growth, connection, and a sense of purpose.
I see. So it's not about demonizing technology altogether.
No, not at all.
It's about using it consciously and intentionally.
Yeah.
Making sure it serves us instead of the other way around.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Haidt's book offers a really hopeful and empowering perspective on how we can do that.
So it sounds like we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But I'm wondering, is there anything we're missing?
Well, Haidt's analysis is really comprehensive.
Oh.
And he offers some great solutions.
Yeah.
But there's one thing he doesn't explicitly address.
Okay. What's that?
And that's the role of individual personality and temperament.
You mean how different people might react to technology in different ways?
Exactly.
Okay.
Not everyone who uses social media gets addicted or depressed.
Right.
Not every kid who plays video games becomes isolated.
Right.
There's a lot of individual variation in how we respond to these digital experiences.
So a one-size-fits-all approach to digital well-being might not be the best strategy.
Precisely. It would be helpful to figure out how to identify, those who are more susceptible to the negative effects of social media and those who might need extra support in navigating the digital world.
So how do we assess someone's, digital susceptibility?
Right.
I feel like that's a whole other deep dive.
It is a whole other deep dive.
We could explore.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of potential for research in that area.
Okay.
But even without having all the answers, we can still take steps now to promote digital well-being for ourselves and our kids.
We don't have to wait for all the research to be done.
Exactly.
Before we start implementing some of these solutions.
Right.
And being more mindful of how we're interacting with technology.
And I think that's where Haidt's work is so valuable.
Okay.
He provides this framework for thinking about these issues in a more nuanced and holistic way.
So it's not about blindly embracing or rejecting technology.
Exactly. But about understanding its potential impact
Yeah.
and making conscious choices about how we use it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's about empowering ourselves and our kids to navigate the digital world in a way that supports our well-being, our relationships, and our sense of purpose.
Well said.
Thanks.
I think that's a perfect note to end on, actually.
Yeah.
For this part of our deep dive,
Right.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have covered a lot of ground.
But we will be back to talk about maybe even more solutions.
More solutions, more ideas.
And where we go from here.
Exactly.
So be sure to join us for part 3.
All right. See you then.
Okay, so.
All right. So we're back.
We're back.
Talking about Gen Z.
Yes.
The anxieties they're facing. And, Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation.
Right. Which has given us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it really has. And, I think one of the things that's been really striking to me is this idea that it's not just about, individual kids being anxious or stressed. It's like a societal issue.
It is a societal issue.
Right. It's about how we've structured our world.
Yeah.
And how technology has kind of reshaped our lives in ways that maybe we didn't anticipate.
50 feet that we weren't really prepared for.
Yeah. And so I guess the big question is where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
What do we do with all this information?
How do we make things better?
Yeah.
Both for ourselves and for, future generations.
Yeah. I think the answer involves both individual awareness and collective action.
So it's a two-pronged approach.
It is a two-pronged approach.
Okay. So what does that look like in practice?
Well, on an individual level,
it
starts with just taking ownership of our own digital well-being.
So what does that mean?
It means paying attention to how technology is making us feel. Our moods, our sleep, our relationships.
Right.
It's about being mindful of how much we're using technology and making conscious choices about how we engage with it.
So it's like taking a step back and asking,
Yeah.
is this app
Right.
Or this device really adding value to my life?
Right. Is this actually serving me?
Or am I just, mindlessly scrolling?
Or are you just kind of on autopilot?
Yeah.
And if you find that you're feeling drained or unhappy
right
after spending time online, maybe it's time to rethink your digital habits.
Okay.
Maybe set some limits on your screen time.
Right.
Delete certain apps.
Yeah.
Or make time for activities that don't involve technology.
Like going for a walk.
Yeah, exactly. Like going for a walk.
Reading a book.
Spending time with friends.
And having a conversation.
Yeah, face to face.
Right.
Without the phones.
Exactly. And I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get caught up.
It is so easy.
In this idea that technology is the solution to everything.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's actually the problem.
It can be the problem.
Right. And so I think you're right. This idea of individual awareness is so important.
Yeah.
But it's not enough, right?
It's not enough. We also need collective action.
Okay. So what does that look like?
Well, it means working together to create a digital world.
Okay.
That's more humane and ethical.
So that's where things like government regulation come in.
Yes, exactly.
Advocating for phone-free schools.
Right.
And creating opportunities for real-world connection.
Yeah, it's about shifting the norms and expectations around technology.
Okay.
So that it's not seen as this all-consuming force.
Right.
But rather as a tool.
Yeah.
That we can use thoughtfully and intentionally.
It's about taking back control.
It is about taking back control.
Remembering that we have a say
in
how technology shapes our lives and our communities.
And one of the most important things we can do is just to start having open and honest conversations about these issues.
So talking about it.
Yeah, talking about it, sharing our struggles, our insights.
With each other.
Yeah, because that can help us feel less alone.
Yeah.
And more empowered to find solutions.
It's like that idea that a problem shared is a problem halved.
Exactly. The more we talk about these challenges, the less shame and isolation we'll feel.
Right.
And the more likely we are to find ways to support each other.
And I think that's where Haidt's book is so valuable.
Yeah.
It's a call to action.
It is.
It's a reminder that we don't have to just accept the status quo.
Right.
We have a choice.
We can choose to create a different kind of digital future.
A future where technology serves humanity.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
And I think that message is resonating with a lot of people.
I think so, too.
There's a growing movement of individuals, organizations, even tech insiders who are pushing for a more ethical and humane approach to technology.
Yeah, it's like we're waking up from this collective digital slumber.
Right.
And realizing that we have the power to shape our own destiny.
So we're not powerless.
We're not powerless in the face of this digital revolution.
We have choices. We have agency.
We have each other.
We have each other.
So to sum it all up, it sounds like the key takeaway here is that we're not powerless.
We're not powerless.
We have choices.
Yeah.
We have agency.
And we can make a difference.
And we can make a difference together. I love that.
And me too.
Well, I think this has been a really insightful conversation.
Yeah, it has.
I really appreciate you joining us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And for everyone listening out there, thanks for tuning in.
And keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep.
Into these important topics.
And remember,
you're
not alone.
You're not alone in this.
We're all in this together.
Let's figure it out together.
All right, that's it for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time.